When the vice president's family dog gets sick, James and his son take it to the vet, to their surprise. The female 20-year-old anti-Trump, woke vet insults the VP and kicks them and their dog out. Hours later, she realizes that revenge is really dish served cold. James Carter had spent 16 years in the Secret Service, long enough to know that the unexpected was the only thing you could truly expect. He guarded diplomats through tense negotiations, shielded senators from protesters hurling eggs, and once tackled a man who'd tried to scale the White House fence with nothing but a megaphone and a dream. But on the morning of March 29, 2025, as he stood in the vice president's Georgetown residence staring at a drooling, glassy-eyed German shepherd named Duke, he realized no amount of training had prepared him for this. Duke wasn't just any dog. He belonged to Vice President Elena Martinez, a woman whose sharp wit and sharper policies had made her a lightning rod for both adoration and hate. The Martinez family had adopted Duke during her campaign trail 2 years prior, a scruffy rescue who'd become a fixture in photo ops and a quiet companion during late-night briefings. Now, though, Duke was sprawled across the kitchen tiles, his breathing shallow, his once vibrant coat dull and matted. Elena, dressed in a navy blazer and slacks, hovered nearby, her phone pressed to her ear as she barked orders at a staffer about a looming energy bill vote. "James," she said, lowering the phone just long enough to meet his eyes, "I need you to take him to the vet. I can't leave, not with this vote. Take Ethan with you, he's been asking to help." Ethan was James's 12-year-old son, a lanky kid with his father's dark hair and his mother's endless curiosity. He'd tagged along that morning because his school was closed for a teacher workday, and James's ex-wife was on a business trip. Ethan knelt beside Duke now, gently stroking the dog's head, his brow furrowed. "He doesn't look good, Dad," Ethan said softly. "Can we fix him?" "We'll get him to someone who can," James replied, though his gut twisted. He wasn't a dog person, never had been, but Duke's labored breaths were hard to ignore. He grabbed the leash from a hook by the door, clipped it to Duke's collar and hoisted the 60-pound animal into his arms with a grunt. "Come on, buddy, let's move." Elena handed him a folded note with the vet's address. Pause and Purpose, a small clinic in Arlington, recommended by her chief of staff. "Call me when you know something," she said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of worry. "And James, thank you." He nodded once, the way he always did when duty called, and ushered Ethan out to the black Suburban parked in the driveway. Duke whimpered as James settled him across the back seat, Ethan sliding in beside him to keep him calm. The morning was crisp, the sky a pale gray, and as James pulled onto the road, he couldn't shake the feeling that this errand was about to become more than a quick drop-off. Pause and Purpose sat wedged between a coffee shop and a thrift store on a quiet Arlington street. Its faded sign bore a cartoon paw print, and the windows were plastered with flyers about pet adoption and flea prevention. James parked the Suburban, its tinted windows and government plates, drawing a few curious glances from passers-by, and helped Ethan guide Duke out. The dog stumbled, his legs shaky, and James caught him before he hit the pavement. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, clutching the leash. "We're almost there." Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. A bell jingled above the door, and a receptionist glanced up from behind a cluttered desk. She was older, her gray hair pulled into a bun, and she offered a tired smile as James approached. "Name?" she asked, tapping at a keyboard. "It's for Duke," James said, nodding toward the dog now lying at Ethan's feet. "He's sick, lethargic, not eating. Belongs to a friend. We don't have an appointment." The receptionist frowned, peering over her glasses at Duke. "He does look rough. Let me see if Dr. Harper can squeeze you in. She's our only vet on shift today." James nodded, stepping back as she picked up a phone. Ethan sat cross-legged beside Duke, whispering reassurances while James scanned the room. A few other pet owners waited. A woman with a yowling cat carrier, a man holding a squirming terrier, but the place felt understaffed, the air heavy with impatience. 10 minutes later, a young woman emerged from a back room, her white coat slung carelessly over a black t-shirt with a faded anarchist symbol. She was maybe 20, with short, dyed purple hair and a nose ring that glinted under the fluorescent lights. Her name tag read, Riley Harper, DVM, though James found it hard to believe someone so young had already earned a veterinary degree. She carried a clipboard, her expression a mix of boredom and irritation as she scanned the waiting area. "Duke?" she called. her voice flat. "That's us," James said, stepping forward with Ethan and the dog in tow. Riley barely glanced at them as she gestured toward an exam room. "Bring him in, let's make this quick." James bristled at her tone but said nothing, guiding Duke through the door Ethan held open. The exam room was small, with a steel table in the center and posters about heartworm on the walls. Riley shut the door behind them and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So, what's wrong with it?" she asked, not bothering to look at Duke. "He's been lethargic," James said evenly. "Not eating, breathing funny, started yesterday." Riley sighed, finally crouching to peer at Duke. She didn't touch him, just squinted at his dull eyes and heaving sides. "Probably ate something dumb, dogs do that." "You give him anything weird?" "No," Ethan piped up, his voice earnest. "He's the vice president's dog. They take really good care of him." Riley froze, her head snapping up. "The vice president? Isn't Elena Martinez?" "Yeah," Ethan said, oblivious to the shift in her demeanor. "She's super nice. Duke's like her best friend." For a moment, Riley said nothing. Then a smirk curled her lips, sharp and bitter. "Oh, that's rich. Martinez's mutt, huh? Figures she'd send her lackeys instead of showing up herself." James's jaw tightened. "We're here to get him help, not debate politics." Riley stood, brushing her hands on her coat as if wiping off something distasteful. "Right. Well, I don't really feel like helping a fascist's dog today. You know she's gutting environmental protections, right? Probably poisoned this poor thing with her own policies." "Excuse me?" James said, his voice low, controlled. He'd faced worse insults in his career, but this was different. Personal, unprovoked. "You heard me," Riley snapped, her eyes narrowing. "I'm not wasting my time on some Trump wannabe's pet. Take it somewhere else." Ethan blinked, confused. "But he's sick. He needs you." "Tough," Riley said, pointing at the door. "Out, now, and take your propaganda pooch with you." James stepped forward, towering over her slight frame, though he kept his hands at his sides. "You're a vet? Your job is to treat animals, not play gatekeeper based on who owns them." "My clinic, my rules," she shot back. "I don't serve bigots or their dogs. Get lost." Before James could respond, she grabbed Duke's leash from Ethan's hand, yanked the dog toward the door, and shoved them both out into the waiting room. Duke yelped as his paws skidded across the tile, and Ethan stumbled, catching himself against the wall. The receptionist gasped, and the other pet owners turned, wide-eyed. "Out!" Riley shouted, slamming the exam room door behind her. James steadied Ethan, his pulse pounding, but he didn't react. Not yet. He scooped Duke into his arms, the dog trembling now, and led Ethan back to the Suburban without a word. The boy's face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "She can't do that, can she, Dad?" Ethan asked as they buckled in. "Duke's gonna die if she doesn't help." "She doesn't get to decide that," James said, starting the engine. He glanced at Duke in the rearview mirror, then at his phone. He dialed Elena's private line. "James," she answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "Duke's worse," he said. "The vet refused to treat him, kicked us out. I'm taking him to another clinic now." Elena's voice hardened. "Refused? Why?" She recognized his owner. James said simply, "Didn't like your politics." There was a beat of silence. "I see. Get him to emergency pet care on 14th. I'll meet you there." "And James, don't let this slide." "Understood," he said, hanging up. He turned to Ethan. "Hold tight, kid. We're fixing this." Emergency pet care was a stark contrast to Pause and Purpose. Bright, bustling, and professional. Within minutes, a vet named Dr. Patel had Duke on a table, running tests and hooking him to an IV. Elena arrived 20 minutes later, her security detail in tow, her face a mask of controlled fury as James recounted the incident. "She said what?" Elena asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Called you a fascist," James said. "Said she wouldn't help your dog because of it." Ethan nodded. She pushed Duke too. He was scared. Elena knelt beside the table where Duke lay, her hand resting on his head. "She's lucky I wasn't there," she muttered, then stood. "But Dr. Patel, how is he?" "Poisoning," Patel said, adjusting the IV. "Looks like antifreeze ingestion, lethal if untreated." We're flushing his system now. He'll need to stay overnight, but he should pull through. Elena exhaled, relief warring with anger. Thank you, keep me updated. She turned to James. I want her license gone. She doesn't deserve to touch another animal. James nodded. I'll make calls. Riley Harper didn't see it coming. After kicking James and Ethan out, she'd returned to her exam room, smug and self-righteous, tweeting from her phone, just told a VP's goons where to shove their sick dog. No service for fascists. She attached a photo of Duke's leash on the floor. A petty trophy of her defiance. By noon, the tweet had 200 likes, her usual crowd of anti-establishment followers cheering her on. She leaned back in her chair, sipping a Red Bull, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond her clinic's walls. James didn't waste time. From the hospital waiting room, he called a contact at the Virginia Veterinary Board, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Voss. He'd met during a security detail years prior. He explained the situation. Riley's refusal to treat a dying animal, her physical aggression, the political ranting. Linda listened, her silence heavy. Send me everything you've got, she said. Witness statements, video if you have it. This isn't just negligence, it's reckless endangerment. The clinic's receptionist, shaken by Riley's outburst, agreed to provide a written account. The waiting room's security camera had caught the shove, and James secured the footage through a quick favor from Arlington PD. By 2 p.m., the board had a file thick enough to bury Riley's career. Meanwhile, Elena's team moved quietly. A call to the Attorney General's office flagged Riley's actions as potential animal cruelty. A felony in Virginia if intent to harm could be proven. The tweet didn't help her case, painting her refusal as premeditated rather than impulsive. By 3 p.m., law enforcement had a warrant. Riley was prepping to leave for the day when the bell jingled again. She rolled her eyes, expecting another walk-in, but froze as 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a plainclothes detective. Riley Harper, the detective asked, holding up a badge. Yes, she said, her bravado faltering. You're under arrest for animal cruelty and attempted harm to a protected animal, he said. Hands where we can see them. What? She sputtered, backing up. This is insane. It's just a dog. A dog you refuse to treat, the detective said, cuffing her wrists. One that almost died because of it. Let's go. Her phone buzzed on the counter as they let her out, notifications piling up. Her tweet had backfired. The John Resist crowd was drowned out by a wave of outrage from pet owners, moderates, and even some of her own followers. You let a dog suffer over politics? One reply read, You're a monster. By 5 p.m. on that crisp March day in 2025, the Veterinary Board had officially suspended Riley Harper's license, a decision delivered via a sternly worded email to her inbox, with a full hearing slated for mid-April. The evidence against her was a landslide, detailed witness statements from shaken clinic staff who'd watched her rant about the vice president's politics, a shaky cell phone video from a bystander showing her jabbing a finger at James Martinez as she refused treatment, and most damning of all, her own impulsive tweet posted at 9:47 a.m., No VP mutt gets my care. Principles over paws. The tweet had exploded online, racking up over 12,000 retweets and a torrent of furious replies before she yanked it down 2 hours later, but the damage was done. Screenshots spread across social media like wildfire. Each one a nail in the coffin of her career. Paws and Purpose's owner, Dr. Henry Callahan, a retired vet with a weathered face and a gravelly voice, had hired Riley on a friend's recommendation, an old college buddy who'd vouched for her skill with animals, if not her temperament. Now sitting in his dimly lit office, surrounded by faded photos of rescued pets, he fired her with a terse text. You're out. Reputational damage is too much. Don't come back. His hands shook slightly as he hit send, knowing the clinic's Yelp page was already drowning in one-star reviews. James Martinez and his son Ethan sat in the hospital waiting room, the faint hum of a vending machine filling the silence between updates on Duke, the vice president's loyal German Shepherd mix. The room smelled faintly of bleach, and the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on the tiled floor. Ethan, 12 and wiry, clutched a crumpled water bottle, his hazel eyes darting to the double doors every time they swung open. Dr. Cattell, the vet on duty, had been in and out all afternoon, his green scrubs wrinkled but his tone increasingly optimistic. Duke's internal injuries from the hit and run were stabilizing, and surgery was going well. Elena Torres, James's Secret Service partner, arrived just after 5:15, her black boots clicking against the floor as she dropped into a chair beside Ethan. Her usual sharp-edged demeanor softened as she listened to the boy recount the day, the way Riley's voice had dripped with venom, the desperate drive to find another clinic, the sight of Duke's blood matting his fur in the back of James's SUV. "You did good, kid," Elena said, her voice steady but kind. She reached over and ruffled Ethan's messy brown hair, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Duke's lucky to have you fighting for him." Ethan grinned, a flicker of pride cutting through his worry. "I just didn't want him to die. He's too cool for that." James's phone buzzed on the plastic armrest, jolting him from the moment. There was a text from Linda Voss, their no-nonsense supervisor. "License pulled. She's done." Elena leaned in, her dark ponytail brushing James's shoulder as she read it, her jaw tightening in approval. "Good," she muttered, crossing her arms. "She doesn't get to play martyr at his expense, not after pulling that stunt." That night the story broke, first on a local news channel. A quick segment with a somber anchor, then spiraling outward as national outlets latched onto the headline, "That refuses VP's dog, faces charges." Riley's mugshot hit the internet by 9 p.m. Her once smug smirk replaced by a wide-eyed deer-in-headlights stare, her blonde hair disheveled from a day that had unraveled beyond her control. At home, James and Ethan sprawled on their worn leather couch, a greasy pizza box open between them, the smell of pepperoni mingling with the faint pine scent of the living room's air freshener. Duke was still at the clinic, hooked to monitors, but Dr. Patel's 8 p.m. call had been definitive. He'd pull through. Ethan, his sneakers kicked off and one sock half on, looked at his dad, a question brewing behind his thoughtful frown. "Dad, why'd she hate the vice president so much?" he asked, picking at a slice. James sighed, setting his beer on the coffee table. "Some people see the world through their anger, Ethan. They let it twist everything, doesn't mean they're right, or that they get to hurt others because of it." Ethan nodded, chewing slowly, his brow furrowed. "I'm just glad Duke's okay." "Me too, buddy," James said, clapping a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the slight frame beneath his palm. "Me too." Riley Harper's fall was swift, career imploding in less than 12 hours, but the story lingered like smoke after a fire. Over coffee shops with steaming mugs and dinner tables cluttered with plates, people dissected it, not just her refusal, but the blurry line between standing on principle and crossing into cruelty. For James, a Secret Service agent with a decade of chaos under his belt, it boiled down to something simpler. A dog lived, a hard lesson landed, and the world kept spinning. Duke returned to the Martinez residence a week later, his tail wagging like a metronome, his brown eyes bright and oblivious to the storm he'd ignited. And in the quiet of his own resolve, James knew he'd done his job. Not just for the vice president, who'd called personally to thank him, but for the kid who'd looked to him to fix it, trusting that right could still win out in a messy world.